Hello, and welcome to day one of the Walk with Kev podcast. Thanks for joining me. My name is Kev, and today I want to talk about psoriatic arthritis. So, thankfully, we've got a much nicer morning today. It is around 7 o'clock. It is Wednesday, and the sun is just about to start coming up behind me. No wind, which is nice, and it's a lot warmer, so that's good. So today I want to talk about psoriatic arthritis. I mentioned yesterday that I have this condition, and it's a big part of the reason why I'm doing this, the reason I get up every morning, go for a walk to loosen up, and it causes, a lot of pain and discomfort in my life. So I'm going to start with the psoriatic part. That word might be familiar. Psoriasis is a pretty common skin condition. It manifests as kind of red and flaky, itchy skin, often on the scalp, but you'll see it elsewhere in the body as well, depends on the severity of how it manifests. I get it on my elbows, knees, and my scalp pretty bad. It's interesting. It's one of those things where if there's areas of trauma to the skin, I tend to flare up with psoriasis. So for example, on my elbows and knees from doing yoga, working out and stuff like that, I'm often kind of on all fours, and the kind of the pressure, the rubbing of the mat or the ground off those areas will cause it to trigger. I've also even got it on my forearm where I was doing kettlebell presses, where I'm holding a kettlebell here, pressing, and the weight and the pressure of the kettlebell on my skin on the forearm was irritating, and that was causing a flare up there. My solution to that, by the way, was I cut the toes off an old pair of socks and I put the socks around my wrists. That bit of cushioning between the kettlebell and my skin was enough to kind of halt the progress of that flare up. So psoriasis is an autoimmune condition. Basically it means my immune system is attacking the healthy cells in my body. So your immune system would usually trigger if there's something bad going on in your body, let's say, like there's a foreign invader, like a virus or something like that, and your immune system will fire up and go attack those cells. Unfortunately, in an autoimmune disease, there's some friendly fire going on in your body. So those cells that are normally trying to protect you are actually attacking your healthy cells. And that's what's going on in psoriasis. That's why the skin gets red, itchy, flaky. They call it plaques, which is a really horrible name. I don't like that. It sounds horrible, but it looks pretty horrible as well. So that's how that manifests in psoriasis. Now, unfortunately for me, around 30, well, I've heard a lot of different numbers here. I've heard 10%, 20%, 30%. So let's just go in the middle at 20% of people that have psoriasis also get psoriatic arthritis. Unfortunately for me, I've found myself in that 20%. So psoriatic arthritis is also an autoimmune condition. You can get psoriatic arthritis without actually having psoriasis or without having the visible signs of psoriasis, but it is a similar autoimmune condition. The difference is, instead of only attacking your skin, the autoimmune system is also attacking your joints. So your joints get inflamed. That inflammation can cause problems like cartilage wearing down, bone damage. As cartilage wears down and you're moving the joints, the bone can get damaged, the bone can get worn away, and it can lead to a lot of pain and discomfort. It can damage the joint, it can damage the bone. So, it's not great. The inflammation is interesting because it gets a bad rep, right? Inflammation is a pretty critical part of what's going on in our body. It helps, as I mentioned already, it's the immune system kicking in. They can be fighting off, foreign invaders, viruses, or whatever. It can also be helping repair tissue. Like if, let's say, you sprain a muscle, twist an ankle, get a cut on your skin, something like that. Inflammation is going to come and help and try and repair that stuff. But chronic inflammation, which is what we get in the case of psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis, is where that system is just in overdrive. So you're constantly inflamed, which is not a good place to be. The reason for that is, it puts a lot of stress in your body. It actually increases the risk of things like cardiovascular disease, cancer, and it has a whole host of other problems there. So chronic inflammation, which is what we get with psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis, is kind of where the real problem is. So naturally managing this inflammation becomes pretty critical. So yeah, that's kind of the condition. What's going on behind the scenes in your body. I'm not going to go too deep into the science right now. I'll save that for another day. But that's kind of basically what's going on. Now, in terms of what it feels like, I think this is interesting to talk about, right? Because I was kind of living with pain and discomfort for about 15 years before I actually got a diagnosis. And interestingly, I looked up some stats on this, and 12 to 15 years is the stat I found in the UK, is the average time it takes for someone to get diagnosed with this condition. That means people are living with this, living in pain, living in discomfort for 12 to 15 years before they actually get a diagnosis to help them understand what's going on. So for me, for a long time, I just thought I had a bad back. I work with computers, I sit at computers a lot. So I naturally thought, hey, I sit all the time. I'm not very fit, I wasn't very fit or active when this first started happening. And I just kind of told myself I've got a bad back. That's what my problem is. There's some people coming. This is where it gets awkward. So I just kind of told myself I have a bad back. And interestingly, I actually went to a physio about this. And the physio agreed with me. The physio said it's probably a bulging disc, which, to be fair to him, the symptoms are pretty similar. Bulging disc is a really common back issue that people have, where basically the discs that live between the vertebrae in your spine, they can get pinched and they can kind of bubble out and pinch nerves in your lower back. And symptomatically, it's quite similar. Your back can be stiff. If you sit down or lie down, it can get worse. So it actually gets better with movement, which is very similar to arthritis. So I went to a physio. I went to a doctor. I talked to the doctor about psoriatic arthritis because I said, hey, I've read up about this and my symptoms look similar. And she said, well, you probably don't have arthritis, but we'll do blood tests anyway. So I did the blood tests. Those tests basically looking for C-reactive proteins, which is an inflammatory marker. So she did those blood tests. Actually, I'm not even convinced she did the blood test, to be honest. I remember she took my blood, and then a couple of weeks later I rang the office. I actually kind of forgot about it, and like 3 weeks later I was like, oh yeah, I got blood tests done, but I never got results. And so I rang the office. She said she'd get back to me, and then I got a text going, oh, sorry for the delay, everything's fine. I didn't really believe her that she actually got them done. So at that point, I had physios, I had a doctor telling me I've got a back injury, I've got a bulging disc, and I kind of just discounted arthritis. I crossed it off the list, and started doing things that you would do to combat a bulging disc, like strengthening your core, working out in certain ways, doing Pilates, doing yoga, all pretty standard things when you've got muscular pain in your back. But yeah, I knew something was wrong, because actually I got pretty strong and I got pretty mobile, but it wasn't helping. So I'm talking about psoriatic arthritis. There are different types, so I can only really talk about my experience here. The first time I felt it, I remember I was walking to college one day, and I saw a bus coming, and I wanted to get on the bus, but I'd have to run to the bus stop to actually catch the bus. So I started running, and I got this really, really sharp pain in my hip. And the way I describe this pain is, if you ever stood on a piece of Lego, imagine that actually you've got a piece of Lego kind of trapped in your hip, in the ball and socket joint. And every now and again, the Lego kind of catches between the bone, between the ball and the socket, and gets crushed, right? Imagine what that feels like. Is kind of how that felt. So I was kind of running, hobbling towards the bus stop in quite a lot of pain. But I didn't really connect it. You know, it was a flare-up, and I didn't know what a flare-up was at the time. And a flare-up is basically when your symptoms of the condition get a lot worse. So that was kind of the first flare-up, and that's the thing about flare-ups as well, is that they come, they're really bad, they suck, and then they disappear. So you can kind of be left thinking, oh, it's just an injury, or I had a cramp, or something like that, right? But over time, the flare-ups kind of became more frequent. Now, I should say I wasn't living a very healthy lifestyle at the time. Drinking, smoking, eating like crap. Kind of typical college lifestyle, I'd say. So yeah, the flare-ups over the years then after that, that's the first one that stands out in my mind. But over the years, it kind of became a little bit more subtle. It wasn't just kind of like this sharp pain where I couldn't walk. Like, my hip did get bad from time to time where I couldn't really walk and I'd limp. But the more subtle one was, I'd get out of bed in the morning and my lower back would be stiff. A few hours would pass and it would kind of loosen up and I'd be okay. Again, I just thought, hey, I got a bad back, that sucks. Then over time, I noticed that if I sat on a couch, like a nice big soft comfy couch, if I sat on that for more than like 10 minutes, I'd be getting up and I'd be feeling stiff. So I'd be standing up and I'd be making noises that you'd expect a person much older than I was to be making when they stand up. And that kind of gradually just got worse. And then I got more active and just kept getting injured. I started walking, then I started running, but I kept hurting myself. My hips would get bad, my knees would get bad. The wind is picking up. Hopefully there's not too much noise being picked up on the microphone. So yeah, I just kept getting worse and worse and worse, and that's about the time I went to the physio and to the doctor and stuff like that. But again, I thought I had a bulging disc, so that's what I was trying to combat. Now, eventually, I found a physio who ran me through a few tests. He said, touch your toes, do a one-legged squat, kind of, can you move your leg in this way? And he saw that, actually I was really mobile and really flexible. And he told me, well, you got to go see a rheumatologist. So I did. Rheumatologist, took some blood, did an MRI, and he confirmed 15 years after that kind of first flare-up that I remember that it's arthritis. It's inflammatory arthritis. And that was a few years ago. That was 2019, so that was 4 years ago that I actually had the diagnosis. But like I said, it was about 15 years before that I was kind of living with it, right? So I think it's important that if you're feeling these symptoms, where from time to time, kind of out of nowhere, you get these flare-ups of pain in any joints in your back or in your hips. If you find that you're getting up in the morning stiff and you're young and there's no explanation for it, it's probably good to go see a doctor and remember that your doctor might not be intimately familiar with these symptoms and this condition, so you might need a second opinion. I did, and I got it. So yeah, don't mess around with this, because the sooner it's got a name, the sooner you know kind of what to do about it, or what kind of treatments you should consider. Maybe you want to go on some of the biologic drugs that they have available. The rheumatologist did try and put me on drugs straight away, and I'm not advocating for or against the drugs here, but I kind of made the decision that the drugs for me were a last resort. So I wanted to try everything first, which led me to looking a lot at diet, exercise, strategies for managing stress, all these sorts of things that can cause inflammation in the body, and also just trying to strengthen my joints to give them as much support as possible. So I'm coming to the end of my walk, and yeah, like I said, I want to just give a quick overview of psoriatic arthritis. Hopefully that was useful. Over the next few days, I'd like to start talking about things like diet and exercise and all of the things I do to actually try and manage this condition. So yeah, talk to you tomorrow. Thank you.